I am Peter from the Daily Rios.
And I'm Eric from Longbox Review, and this is episode 22 of Peter and Eric's Legion Project podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to the Legion Project podcast. As I said, this is episode 22, and I am your host, Eric.
And I'm Peter.
Peter, how the heck are you today?
Hey, we're here.
Among
I crawled out of bed,
yeah.
Out of my, the Peter-sized imprint on my bed to come and talk to you. And the listeners.
Oh, what weird, crazy times. I was trying to think of another adjective there to throw in, but it's just like, I can't even, my mind's having a hard time comprehending the world in which we live.
Let's get a Phantom Zone projector, and we'll be like Ma now, and we'll just skip ahead to 1,000 years.
Oh my God, yeah. This is not the future that I wanted, Peter. I'm so glad that we're doing this podcast because at least I get to experience a somewhat better future than the one or the time that in which I'm currently residing.
But actually, don't all future stories, they have to go through that one period? Like, think of Star Trek, right? Like, they're like, oh, the genetic wars and World War 20 and whatever. And like, Legion, or like Kirby's Great Disaster. We always have to go through tragedy before we get out on the other side.
Mm-hmm. And I
just didn't want to live in that part.
Yeah, right. Didn't in the Legion timeline, the original Legion timeline, didn't they have like 4 or 5 or even 6 world wars?
It was crazy.
Something like that.
It's crazy.
Actually, that's apropos because that reminds me, I was just looking at the DC previews, and speaking of DC future timelines, so they had published the precursor to the Legion of Superheroes, the current title, the Legion of Superheroes Millennium, that 2-issue series that you and I covered. And we had talked about then, how are they going to collect this? This 2-issue thing, and I think we speculated they would probably put it together with some issues of the current title, and that's exactly what I saw. That's exactly what they're doing. They're taking those 2 issues, Legion of Superheroes Millennium, and plopping them into a collection of the first 6 issues of the current Legion series in a hardcover edition.
Do you remember what the price tag was?
I believe it's $30. Let me check that though.
Oh, well, that's not terrible. I mean, because those issues are the Legion issues are $3 to $4 each. I don't know if the first issue was. I can't remember. The first issue was like $4.99, but the Millennium issues were a little more expensive. So I guess that sounds about right.
Yeah, it is. It's $30 for 232 pages on sale July in this catalog. I'm sure that will be pushed out.
Well, that gives us a notion on how to handle, if we want to cover it. Maybe we can schedule an episode for like around that time, so that people who are trade waiters, we can get an episode on issues 1 through 6, since we already did the Millennium issues, and we did issue 1 too. But then this way, we could talk about all of it.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see.
Good.
We'll see if
Well, who knows what's going to happen in the next several months, given the shutdown
and all the distribution craziness that's going on.
Oh, right. Yeah, right now.
Yeah, DC and Diamond. People are just trying. We're all just trying stuff.
Yeah.
2020. Who knew?
Mm-hmm.
Who knew? Speaking of 2020, you're celebrating 10 years of the Long Box Review podcast this year.
That's right. Yeah, 10 years.
I saw you're putting out some retro episodes on your feed.
Yeah, that was a fun exercise. So for 10 years, I chose out of the 100 and well, it's somewhere over 200 episodes total with everything that's in the feed. But I had to go through all those and decide which 10 I wanted to spotlight, I guess. 10 favorites or, something like that. There's something about those episodes that I wanted to rebroadcast to the listeners.
Mm-hmm. It's cool. It's a cool idea.
Well, it certainly makes it easy to put out some content right now when I don't have a lot of time to do so.
Yeah, you're not like me. You're actually going to work.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Although I don't know, because my wife has been working from home, and the kids, of course, our two granddaughters who are in middle and high school, are at home. They're all working at home, doing homework and work. And let me tell you, I come home at times, some days, and tempers are high, and people are getting on each other's nerves, So maybe it's a good thing that I have to go to work.
Yeah, that's true. I'm arguing with my lamp.
Oh no.
No, just being silly.
Well, yeah. So we were talking about this before we started recording, but Peter, you put out that tweet, I think it was, about how many days it was since you've seen or been in the presence of someone else, yeah. And I couldn't even imagine that situation. So how do you cope? What are you doing to fill your days?
It's like I'm in solitary confinement.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm concerned about.
You think I'd be podcasting more, but I haven't. You know what I have been doing, though, which is great? I finally am going through my 30-some long boxes and my shelves of trades and updating my inventory. I mean, like, I'm finally putting in a lot of stuff that's not in my inventory. So that's great to kind of go, oh, right, yeah, I have that. Oh, right, yeah, here it is. So it's kind of like a massive reorganization. It's because I can have boxes all over the place. So that's been kind of fun. And I had already finished reading Game of Thrones, and I powered through all 7, 8 seasons, finally finished that. And I am working on other things. Like I'm rewatching Titans season 1 so I can finish Titans season 2 on the DCU app so I can do my podcasts on those. And then I am working. I'm working from home. So but then other days, I'm just sort of vegging in front of my laptop or my TV and just going, what's going on in the world today? Or how about I just lose myself in this for 20 episodes?
Well, I hope that people, listeners, are doing that with this podcast.
Yeah, right. Go back to the beginning. Well, you got time.
Yeah, if you haven't started before, you can start now. Even though this is episode 22. In other words, why would they start with episode 22 and hear this message?
Every podcast is somebody's first.
Very true. Just like comics.
Just like comics. And we are at the start of the second third of this run. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's kind of like it's not a bad place to start, actually.
Well, it is curious because the title of this issue is Dead End. So,
how prophetic.
Yes. Oh boy, that was in my notes, Peter.
All right. Well, then let's if we're all good, let's start with Legion of Superheroes issue 22.
Well, as I said, the title of this issue is Dead End, which, as I said in my notes, is somewhat prophetic given the times in which we live. This was written by Paul Levitz, Greg LaRocque, penciler, Mike DiCarlo, guest inker, John Costanza, letterer, Carl Gafford, colorist, and Karen Berger is the editor, with a cover by LaRocque and Malstedt. So what happens in issue 22, Dead End? Well, longtime Legion villain Universo introduces the antagonist of the issue, the Restorer, great name, and sets him off on a swath of destruction across Metropolis. At Planet Labyrinth, the new Tacron Galtos, some Legionnaires are helping to build the interior while Sensor Girl is becoming paranoid that everyone is suspicious of her. Meanwhile, the Restorer attacks Metropolis University, announcing, "All this technological clutter must be destroyed." His attack traps a professor and Ron Vidar. The Legionnaires arrive, and Wildfire pursues their assailant, who gets away, while Talos and Brainiac 5 attend to their fallen friend. At the Legion Techno Repair Center, Mon-El contemplates his current physical condition, while Shadowlass languishes nearby. Brainiac 5 deduces that the Restorer's suit is made from stolen tech, including some from the Technopark incident in issues previous, and entertains a plan with the team. Back on Labyrinth, in a Legion cruiser, Shrinking Violet compliments Lightning Lass for her work as team leader, and Violet has a candid conversation with Ayla. Quote, "I've changed my whole life, Ayla. What about you?" What? What's going on there? Sensor Girl then suddenly exclaims that someone is aboard who should not be. She helps Vi locate and apprehend Microlad. Stowaway Microlad. Brainy's plan draws the Restorer to the London Europolis, and I had to practice pronouncing that 3 times. Power Sphere, where Dawnstar and Tellus apprehend the Echo Terrorist. Tellus attempts to read Restorer's mind, but Restorer's mind turns inward, destroying itself. And finally, President Desai expresses dissatisfaction to Science Police Chief Zendak about the Legionnaires' involvement in the case, and Vid Gupta assures the president that he needs more time to deal with the situation. The issue ends with Universo gloating to himself about a successful plan. Peter, it sounds like a whole lot of stuff happened in this issue based on that that synopsis, but this is really a pretty simple plot.
I was kind of mixed on the issue generally.
Mm-hmm.
I thought there was some good, some standard, but it didn't feel like anything with major weight.
Yes.
Not that it felt like a respite or anything from the Sensor Girl story. It was kind of a nice little departure, but after I was done with it, I was like, oh, okay. Clearly they're setting some stuff up, but it's also one of the first full issues that we got without a backup tale. So, but then after I read it, and then I walked away and then read it again a couple days later or whatever, I was like, okay, short of just one particular scene that I absolutely love, the rest of it I was like, okay, that was an issue.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm pretty sure that I have the same scene. I'm probably sure that we agree on that one scene. So I'll be curious when we get to that.
Yeah. And even the art, I thought the art was pretty good in most places, but then there were some places that felt very shortcutty, that I was like, what is happening in this panel? It just wasn't as defined as maybe we might have gotten from another artist.
Mm-hmm.
And in a couple places just felt a little confusing. So it's like a decent Paul Levitz, Greg LaRocque and company issue that's not enough to go, wow, this is sort of not good, like a whatever issue that was a couple issues ago. But I'd have to go back and go, has there been an issue with Greg LaRocque that has really made me go, wow?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
So.
I would even say, Mike DiCarlo has done some inks for, a few issues now? And this might sound contrary to what you were just saying, because I totally agree with everything you just said, but there are points in here where I in certain panels that I'm looking at and going, wow, Mike DiCarlo does, I think, a better job at complementing LaRocque's work, or maybe even improving it. but at other times it comes across as somewhat uneven.
Yeah, so I think we're pretty much on the same page then, with our general thoughts then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you think of the cover? And the cover in comparison to Tales 347.
Yeah. Hmm. It's I generally speaking, I like collage covers, and that's the one we get where you get these different portions of these characters' faces, which visually striking, interesting. It makes you want to go, what's this issue about? But at the same time, it's just it's just a head on a cover when you boil it down. And what does it actually say about the story? And not that every cover has to do that, but that's just where my mind goes. The cover has to call attention to itself to get someone to buy it, right? That's the primary responsibility of a cover. And then two, it should say something about either the title itself or the issue itself. And I don't know what this is doing, other than being visually different on the stands, perhaps.
So the first cover by LaRocque and Malstead, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second cover by Kurt Swan and J.R. I don't know if that's like Joe Rubenstein or I don't know.
Yeah, I tried to find that out too, and curse the heavens that Comic Book DB is no longer around.
Yeah. And I couldn't think of who's J.R. in relation to Kurt Swan. So that was kind of maybe a listener might know who that is. Because the Kurt Swan cover is fairly standard.
Yeah.
It doesn't... I mean, it is a cover, but it feels like it could even be just a generic panel or page. There's nothing about it that... In my mind, the Tales cover feels very secondary. Like it really feels like this is a reprint. Like they just threw it together. I'm not a fan of either of the two covers. I'll back up the Baxter cover though, in terms of, I agree, it's very mishmashy. I feel like what I'm also feeling against LaRocque's interior art is, and maybe this is what Levitz was referring to when he called him a soldier, the artwork is there, and you can read the story, and it works on that level. But what I find that I'm missing is a sense of creative design.
Mm-hmm.
Think of what Lytle did on some of his splash pages, and just there was just something that had the layout of each page and panel meant a little bit more to my eye. Certainly with Giffen, there's very creative scene shifts, setting up the scenes with certain planets. And LaRocque does it too, but there's just something about Giffen that, Giffen is a master storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's the thing that LaRocque in these early stages it's not there. And when I look at the cover, I appreciate I sort of like the duality that's happening with all the characters, because there is a scene between Dawnstar and the Restorer, and there is something to be said about Universo and Tellus being both mind-controlling individuals, and certainly with Sensor Girl and Brainiac 5, there's a connection there, even if it's not in the issue that strongly.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that it is kind of crossing on those elements. You could even go so far as saying, you got the 3 Legionnaires on the right, you have 2 villains on the left, but so is Sensor Girl. Ooh, But what bothers me is the kind of like the tearing away of the cover, or whatever the line work is supposed to be that separates them.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like under another artist that would have a different composition that would not be so jarring. Maybe it would be more straight lines, or I don't know. That's what bothers my eye. It's kind of like it's mishmashy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a jigsaw puzzle that doesn't go together, and I know that that's their intention, but I wish it was just a little more organized.
Yeah, perhaps with more intent behind it.
Yeah.
This just looks like I'm presupposing or post-supposing. It looks like, well, they need a cover, and LaRogue just kind of threw this together.
I get what they're doing, especially with the story, but it's another issue, another two issues, two covers where I'm like, I'd like to see a third option.
But I will say, despite my criticisms of the cover, I still prefer it over the Kurt Swan cover. Partially for what you said about it, and this might be sacrilegious to some listeners out there, but I don't care for Kurt Swan. The way I describe this cover is this is Kurt Swan's static action, and that's generally how I feel about Swan. He portrays action, but I don't get the sense of any kind of movement on the page. Even despite the visual that that we're looking at here for the Tales cover, it's just like it's like a picture of. I mean, obviously it is. It's a picture of action. It's not the action itself. You know that weird dichotomy in comics where we have the illusion of movement, right, across panels and on the page, and for me at least, my brain just interprets that, right, so that I'm visualizing that action as if it actually, as if it's like a motion picture or something, right?
Right.
I don't get that same feeling from anything that Kurt Swan does.
That's like sacrilegious.
I know,
during a Legion project, a Legion podcast. I mean, Kurt Swan and the Legion. It's like Oreos and milk.
I know. I'm sorry. Send the hate mail to longboxreview@gmail.com.
That's okay. I get it. When I was a kid reading Superman, like I grew up on the pre-crisis Superman, as I'm sure you did too, action.
Mm-hmm.
Kurt Swan was all over the place. That was
yeah.
Good.
I just to undercut what I just said, soften the blow, perhaps. I totally understand. I totally get and recognize that Kurt Swan's strengths and his craftsmanship. I mean, his work on Superman, I think, is just well done. It's just that he's great at drawing faces and displaying emotion on those faces, but everything else, it's okay.
Yeah. So like if you look at like his work 3-4 years leading up to the crisis, it was really sort of his return to the Superman books. I think I read it might have been an interview with John Byrne, who would take over Superman in 86 and 87, where he mentions how, if you look at like the Silver Age Superman stories, Superboy, Supergirl, a lot of Kurt Swan, a lot of Kurt Schaffenberger, just fairly standard DC work at that time, even the stories. But then when you get to like, Post and Neil Adams, and when the movie hit, they made a conscious decision in the Superman books to try to emulate not Christopher Reeve, but maybe somebody a little bit younger. So that's where you got Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, who I'm pretty sure either in that John Byrne interview or elsewhere, Garcia Lopez was going to be kind of like the inheritor of the Superman line, and certainly on covers, and there were a lot of interior work that Lopez did. So you'd got a Superman that was a little bit younger looking. The hair got messed up a little bit more. Like Kurt Swan to me is Superman in his 40s, whereas like Garcia Lopez is like Superman in his 20s, 30s.
Yeah.
But then because Lopez got other work, Kurt Swan got brought, and other people, Eduardo Barreto and some other people, they got put back onto Superman, and they kind of restored it back to that Silver Age look prior to the crisis, So that was really the Superman that I grew up on, and I think Swan, unlike people like Infantino or Gene Cologne or even people like George Tuska. Like the first time or Don Heck, like the first time I saw a lot of their artwork, I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't like this.
Yeah.
Especially because I was reading Perez and Jones and all that. But then I grew to have an appreciation. But Kurt Swan, from the beginning, I was kind of like, okay, yeah, I get that. I get why this artwork is kind of, because I think it does still have a craftsmanship, a design sense to it, even if it is kind of old school.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, yeah. And to bring it back to LaRocque, that's kind of like I feel like this LaRocque that we're getting is like, the first 2-3 years of when like Todd McFarlane and Liefeld and Lee hit, where there's an underlying style there, but it's wild and or it's just like it hasn't settled yet. Now, I don't think LaRocque is as creative as some of those people I just mentioned, but he also is. He's a lot cleaner, right? He's not trying to be a sensationalist artist,
right?
That's not outside of like Sienkiewicz at this time. Nobody was being sensationalist, so it's just I want a little more design, and like if I carry that over into the book itself, if we're ready to do that.
Mm-hmm.
The parts where I feel like it gets confusing, and it's not enough to hinder the story, but it's just like, see, I don't get that. I don't get what's happening there. Like on page 15, where the Legion, they're at the new prison planet, Labyrinth, because Tachyon Galtos was destroyed, as you mentioned. So they say, okay, Ayla, power up the weapon systems panel. So she does. But I'm kind of like, okay, they're floating on top on that ship. The prison is the platform, right? Yeah, the prison looks like it's below them, but then she's firing up.
Yeah.
But what is she firing into? Because all we see is her power, not anything else. So, like, again, that's not major when it comes to the story, but I was like, what's happening there?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other place that happens is so page 23. Dawnstar takes the power circuit that's on the Restorer's chest, and then they kind of like go to attack him, but then she gets attacked, I think, by the power circuit. I think that's what's happening there. It's again not like it needs a huge explanation, but that's another place that I was like, I don't get what's happening there. And then there's one more, the third one. Let's see. This is back on 9 and 10, where again they're kind of, especially panel 4, page 10, where they're trying to fix the building, hold it up, and is that what I'm looking at? Let me hold on. No page numbers.
Where you're looking for that, it's curious. You say no page numbers because there are no page numbers in the issue, this issue, but in the Tales book, which was a year later, they still have page numbers in them. Just put page numbers in.
See, it's comics' way of growing up, right? Like we don't need page numbers anymore.
Didn't they know that 30 years later someone would be podcasting about these comics? Come on.
So it's there on page 10, and Magnetic Kid is trying to hold up the building that the Restorer kind of blew through. But I feel like this whole sequence under a different artist might have been a little more dramatic, or just, I get it. In that fourth panel, he's holding it up, and Sunboy is welding the metal to keep it upright, but there's no shot of the building. It's just all powers.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no sort of connection. And so again, little things like that, where I think there are some other places in the artwork that I really like. There's a shortcut, there's a shorthand going on that I'm not appreciating.
Yeah. Yeah, and that whole panels power display, I mean, that happens even on the previous page that you're talking about, and it seems like that it did seem like that happened a lot here. But yeah, there are little things in here that I thought were good or at least interesting. But maybe that has more to do with the colorist than LaRoque's work.
Hmm.
Because on that, like I said, that previous page where Wildfire is attacking the Restorer, about the middle of the page, you've got that close up of Wildfire and the way that he's lit up from it's kind of confusing. What's the light source coming? Where's the light source coming from? At first, I thought it was the Restorer attacking him or something, but then it turned. You read on, it looks like it's the beginning of what Sunboy is doing, which is doing this solar flash or something to blind Wildfire for some reason, to get him to stop or something.
Or to blind the Restorer, right? If it's coming from behind him towards the Restorer.
Well, it's exactly. See, that's exactly it. But right. the dialogue suggests that Sunboy was trying to get Wildfire to stop because Restorer was trying to, as he says, he was about to use that damper on your containment suit. I didn't want to take chances. Oh, so he does say, I blinded him. Yeah, but again, this is more, maybe it's more of a complaint than it is a compliment. But no, I really like the way the colors were presented of that one panel of Wildfire, and then we get that shift because we are blinded. In one panel we're blinded as the viewer of this scene, and our vision comes into focus over the course of two more panels. I thought that was a nice little touch, even though I was confused as to initially what was going on here.
Right.
Whose point of view are we experiencing through this? And if it's ours, if it's intended to be our point of view, then that just throws me out of the book.
Yeah, and there are a couple, just to continue on the art. This is sort of rare for us to kind of go to the art first, but
no, right?
Like the shot of Labyrinth, the planet, it's pretty good. I feel like under Giffen or Lido, it might have been a little more science fiction-y, but it's pretty crazy, that there's this machinery sucking energy from the sun and then powering the individual, systems or whatever. Like, that's cool. Like, okay, that's a pretty good establishing shot. And then you turn the page, the bottom panel where we see Restorer blowing up things, and he's kind of squatting down as he's firing. Like, I like that. Like, it kind of feels almost like that could be Giffen, that could be Kirby. I like that. Like, there's a sense of, it's not the usual flat perspective that sometimes LaRoque uses.
Yeah.
So that's cool. And then to go along with what you said about those blinding panels, at the end of the issue where Tellus is looking into the Restorer's mind, let's see, 3 pages before the end, those 6 panels up top where he's like getting closer and closer into his mind, and then the mind snaps, like these very vertical small panels. Again, that looks very Giffen. Looks very Giffen.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Maybe some of that is DiCarlo, right? Like maybe DiCarlo is trying to bring some sensibility of what he did over Lido or whoever,
Mm-hmm.
So on those couple places and story wise, the it's all making sense,
Oh yeah.
Nothing confusing. It was just a few things that as I was reading through, I was like really taking notice of it. So I just wanted to talk about that for a little bit.
One more thing about the colors on this. I mentioned that Wildfire panel. There's, I don't know what this page is. Ultra Boy is attacking Restorer, and then Restorer hits him with radiation, which Ultra Boy, even in his invulnerable state, is susceptible to at times. But I like the way that they did the colors of that particular panel, altering the colors of his uniform and just giving you a sense of he's actually being dosed with radiation. I like what they did there. So Carl Gafford, I thought, did a good job on that.
As a Universo story, we get the revelation that Universo is Vice President Vid Gupta, and we get a little bit of a roundup of some of the subplots. The main subplot of what was going on in issue number, was it like 13 or something, 13 or 14, with the whole techno park destruction, and then a bunch of science police who got whose minds were blank, and they weren't sure why they were going up against the Legion. We finally kind of put a capper on that, and I know that was one of the subplots that you were like, okay, what the heck is that?
Mm-hmm.
So we get it. We get the note. We get the revelation. Universo is Vidgupta. There's something going on. He has some kind of master plan. This is, just to jump the timeline, you could sort of look at this as a prelude to the Universo project, which is not going to happen for another 8-9 issues or so, that this very podcast is named after. What did you think of? Is it getting you excited for that storyline, in terms of wrapping up the science police stuff and just the revelation that Universo is Vidgupta? Like, what'd you think? What'd you make of all that?
Well, so I don't know if you wanted to talk about Universo's first appearance in the Legion lore, but I found a connection there because this issue was, or the way that this issue opens is like Universo is right there. I mean, he's not been teased. Perhaps there was one panel of Vidgupta in issue number 10, and that's the last time that we saw that character, at least that I could tell when I was just quickly going through all the issues.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's been 12 issues since we saw this character, as far as I know, and there was a hint that there was something up with him, but it wasn't explicit. We didn't know. You can make your guess, but you didn't know who this was. And then you open this, this comic, and then boom, he's right there, and not even like, I mean, it's a weird kind of slow reveal because you're seeing him from behind, but if you know Universo, you know who that is, and they even say it here, halfway down the page, but I found it very curious that we got no. I mean, this is just this. You could think of this as like a total surprise. It's like, boom, here he is, and I was like, well, why didn't you tease up to that? Slowly build that up.
Yeah.
But then 2, why not just break that trope and just throw him in there? And like I said, that reminded me of when I just reread his first appearance, because Peter had recommended that we take a look at his first appearance in Adventure, right? Mm-hmm. Adventure Comics 349. And it's very similar because, much like that happened back then in the Silver Age of the Legion, characters would just show up and the plot would go from there. And this is no different. So I kind of like that. I don't know if that was a conscious thing on Paul Levitz's part to do it that way. But it was if it wasn't, it was a nice happenstance that Universo is just kind of there and his machinations are moving forward. So I kind of thought that was a neat connection. I guess generally, Universo is one of those, for me, interesting characters. He seems so simple in a way, because his power is, quote, super hypnosis. I love those Silver Age conceits. But he's always thwarted seemingly very easily. In the past, at least from what I recall. I don't remember. I couldn't even tell you, Peter, any specific stories. I just have this general sense that much like all the other Legion foes, he's someone they have to contend with every once in a while, but he's not a major threat, right? But here, what he's doing, just from a plot perspective, he has apparently learned his lesson from his first appearance, because even then he was trying to take over the United Planets. But the way he went about it in that first appearance was so clunky and didn't make a whole lot of sense. But here he's being devious and thinking ahead and making these plans. And he's coming across more as a master criminal sort And I like that development in this character with this reveal and what he's doing. And now if only Ron Vidar won't get in his way, he'll be just fine.
Which I guess makes sense why Ron Vidar has made a few appearances leading up to this issue.
Mm-hmm.
Because where Ron Vidar goes, Universo goes, just like that very first story.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I like all that stuff you said. I kind of echo all of it. As a way to officially go back into Legion lore, I thought that, well, this is a great way for me to actually... you've read Universo's first appearance before. I have not. So that was the first time I read that. So I kind of like that a lot of these issues we're able to look backwards. And what's also kind of fun and crazy is that Adventure Comics 349 came out in the middle of 1966. So this issue of Legion of Superheroes number 22 came out in 1986. So Universo is celebrating like 20 years at this point.
Do you think Paul Levitz was conscious of that, and that's why he was? I mean, I've read articles in the Legion companion book where, he has all this plot stuff that on cards and stuff that he would go through and map out and stuff. Of course, some of that had to do with just there were so many characters that he had to keep track of. That's how he did it. But I just have to extrapolate that he's conscious of these kinds of things.
I'd agree with that, actually. I feel like there's a lot of things that kind of cycle back to either certain anniversaries or certainly certain stories. And maybe there is a little bit of a danger of that maybe later on in this series, in this run. I don't know if okay, now we're back to this cycle again and we're back to this cycle again. But I feel like you might be right. And since Kurt Swan was the original artist on that Adventure comic story, it actually makes sense that he's doing the cover on the Tales.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So maybe it is kind of like a little throwback. And I agree with what you said about that first story too. I think that's why it's kind of fun to go back and read older Legion stories, because I got that same thing where he's like, okay, he's taking over the world. First of all, the story itself, the Adventure Comics issue, was so strange because we got Universo, but then very quickly it just became about the Legionnaires going through all those different times.
Mm-hmm.
And Universo was like nowhere to be found. And there was all this like stuff about, oh, if only I had my flight ring, I could. I'm like, wait, why would you go anywhere without it? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Like, it's Jim Shooter. He's 14, whatever. And I also wrote down here, I feel very much that I wonder if Ron Vidar is a Jim Shooter fiction suit, if he created that character as a way to put himself into a story, because he's a young boy. He's not named in that first issue, but he's clearly Universo's son, and he's a scientific genius, and he creates a time cube, even though the Legionnaires have a time bubble. And it's because of him they're able to defeat Universo. So like that, okay, so Shooter's already laying the groundwork for future Universo stories. And what you said about Universo not being a major player, I mean, he doesn't really have a lot of appearances before the Baxter run, It's not like he's showing up every 4 issues or whatever. I mean the Legion has a huge villains rogues gallery, so it's it makes sense that they're not going to always be used. So what you said is right. Like I think he does work better as a background character. That certainly plays into the 5 years later Legion, the way they use him there. And then one of the things we may want to read before we actually get to the Universo project is what Levitz referenced in the letter column for this issue in a future issue. I think it was like issue 28, referenced the Universo story that the Universo project is based on. So I guess in one of his later appearances, after his first appearance, there's a story where, again, he's sort of like taking over the world. But it might be fun to read that story, whatever that is. I forget the issue numbers. Before we do the Universo project, because clearly that's what Levitz was referencing. So to go back to this whole notion that Levitz is constantly looking backwards, yeah, I mean he admits it there, and it seems very right. I just was I was like, oh, he's Vid Gupta. I mean, I knew that, but in these first 3 pages, you're like, oh, okay, there it is. Like, no. That's it. Like, no buildup. We already have the Sensor Girl mystery buildup. We don't need this one. And again, maybe under a different artist, the reveal might have actually been a reveal on a page turn or something like that. But it just was very matter of fact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, the previous, like I said, Vid Gupta we last saw in issue 10, and there is a panel of him saying something that sounds vaguely menacing. Or at least the way that his the face was drawn. I forget if that was LaRocque or Lytle now, but there is just much like on page, what is it, 1, 2, 3, page 3. There's a panel there where Universo transforms himself, or casts the illusion that he's Vid Gupta to the science police officer that stumbles into the room, and his right eye is twinkling because that's where his monocle is. But in issue 10, the twinkle is on his left eye, which was weird, given what they're showing here. So obviously they weren't thinking about that, but or somebody screwed up. But yeah, it was odd the way that this was just shown to us. Like I said, you would expect more of a build up over time. Especially, I think with Levitz, because he's the master of subplots and little reveals as you go through. I mean, just look at all the stuff we've talked about here recently regarding Sensor Girl, and why didn't we get that with Universo? It seems very strange that he didn't do it that way, but then again, here we are.
Yeah. And by the way, the issue where the Technopark thing happened, it was issue 16, not 13. And then there was a callback to it in issue 19. So from 10 to 16 to 19 to 22. That's basically the course of this subplot. And then the use of, I'm not entirely sure, it's kind of funny. Like, he did all this, Universo did all this with this mind-wiped person, this restorer, who wants to, destroy technology so they can go back to just, the earth and nature or whatever. It was just all of a way to get the Legionnaires off the scent of those science police officers who had blank minds, right? Like, that's actually something that connects all the way back to the first issue. Like, when they try to first appearance, when they try to read somebody's mind that's been controlled by Universo, it just comes up blank. And then, so that by the end of this issue, and it's Ultra Boy, Tellus, and Dawnstar who make this kind of leap in logic, I think, where they're like trying to look at Restorer's mind, but then the Restorer's, as you said, it collapses in on itself, his mind, and then they're like, oh, well, then he must be responsible for the science police officers, right? Like, it must be him, and we can wrap that up, or I guess we'll never know, and that's just part of being a Legionnaire.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're not at the Universo project yet, so I don't know if some of the reasons why the Technopark was even destroyed in the first place, or attacked in the first place, I don't know. I don't know what any of that means. So I think on that level, and maybe I'm reading too much, I'm reading with 30 years of experience after this issue, that I'm just trying too hard to find reasons. But I think, as you said, like, the plot of it all was kind of like, and it's more about like the intrigue and what's going to come after.
Yeah, again, much like his first appearance, maybe I already said this, but it seems his machinations in this with the Restorer, it just seems like this overly complicated idea to just throw the Legionnaires off his scent but they really weren't even on his scent. I mean, they were
Yeah, right.
they were curious. They were pondering this seems weird. Why did this happen? But they don't seem very engaged in it whatsoever.
Yeah.
So maybe that's just his paranoia that's coming out. I don't know.
Yeah. And we're probably just overthinking it.
Yeah, that too.
I also have to take issue with Tellus and Ultra Boy and them when they're like reading the Restorer's. I thought that was a little intrusive. A little. Is the Legion in the right to be doing that? You know, like, isn't that the science police job? I guess maybe, is that something Saturn Girl would have done? Like, just, I'm going to go in as my, it's closing, it's destroyed. Oh, well, let's go. I was like, whoa. I wasn't, how does that speak to Tellus as a rookie? I don't know. Did you have any thoughts on that scene?
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, but in previous appearances of Tellus, he seemed to be reticent to do these things, and perhaps it was just more out of his inexperience that he didn't want to do something wrong because he is the rookie, like you said. So this seemed very strange to me that he would just dive right in to it, but he's with these other Legionnaires, these old time Legionnaires, and they're like, no, let's do this, and he's like, okay. So I'm not really sure how to take that with him. I will say though, you mentioned Saturn Girl. I totally think that she would do this.
Oh.
But yeah, it also depends on what version of Saturn Girl we're getting this year. So it's hard to say.
Well, I think she would have done it, but I think she would have gone in going, okay, I have to be careful.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Oh, his mind slipped. Okay, I got to pull away. And she's probably strong enough that she might have circumvented what happened. Whereas with Tellus, it was just like, and especially, no offense, I know Ultra Boy's your favorite, but Ultra Boy's going to be like, yeah, sure, go ahead, go right ahead.
Oh, yeah, of course he will.
Poke a hole in his brain, I don't care. And Dawnstar's just Dawnstar, like, I don't think any of those two would be like, there's no senior member. Well, Ultra Boy's a senior member, but you know what I mean? Like, there's no moral center.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
It just bothered me a little bit. And they had to get to that point anyway, but maybe if Levitz would have wrapped it up into they've handed him over to the science police and Zendek was like, okay, go do your thing, then I might have been like, okay, that makes sense.
Well, and to extrapolate your proposal there, all Universo had to do is go in there and wipe his mind too as the science police officer. So I mean, it's so many things that could easily be resolved here that I don't know. We just, again, it seems like overly complicated plot points to get to point B.
So and especially as like the start of the second third of this run, although they didn't know that. It's not like they knew, we got 63 issues. But it clearly, this issue and next issue are little ramp ups to the larger Sensor Girl story in terms of like, let's pull back a little. I feel like it's kind of smart actually that we're not knee deep into the Sensor Girl stuff. Mm-hmm. And again, this is all hindsight, but because otherwise it would just be another issue of like Brainy going, oh, what's going on? We get a small little thing. We can, if you want to jump to that little part of where Sensor Girl senses Micro Lad. So again, this whole sequence, the Legionnaires once again are dealing with moving villains to the new prison planet Labyrinth, which I like. Although I like Takron Galtos, but I like Labyrinth too. And we have a couple scenes we have a couple panels with Chameleon Boy and Sensor Girl about the way the planet functions, and that it's got this force field that's generated from the sun that was Brainiac 5's invention, and that kind of rattles Sensor Girl.
Mm-hmm.
which was interesting because it's maybe Levitz's way to give a clue to who she is, although that may not seem so obvious what the clue is. Like,
Yeah.
again, without trying to spoil who she is, there was some stuff in there that I was like, okay, I guess the notion of a force field protecting a planet is enough to rattle her. Is that more of putting readers onto the fact that she's Supergirl because, oh, he could have saved Krypton, but no, Brainiac 5 wasn't around during that time, So, do you have any thoughts on that little
Well,
scene?
it was mostly about Chameleon Boy, but I'll talk about that in a second. But I thought that was odd too. I was trying to figure out why does this rattle her? As Chameleon Boy says, why didn't she know about the shield, and why did it upset her so? I I didn't really take this as her being upset, and part of that is we don't see her face, right? She just stumbles as she says, "I must go," but so to me it was just like, what are we supposed to take? What are we supposed to take from this? What is the interpretation of this event that makes sense? And I was just confused. Now, I know by reading a future issue, letters page in the future issue where Levitz goes through and points out all of the clues in all of the issues. I know this is one of those things, but knowing what he said about this particular scene, I don't get it. Based on what is shown here. So it's a very, to me, it's a bit of an esoteric clue, but I'll say I interpreted it as perhaps she, at this point, in the story I'm reading through here, and go, oh, she's sensing this whole issue, this whole thing with Microlad on the ship, and that's why she had to go, as opposed to it upsetting her, or Cam's interpretation that it upsets her. So I don't know. What other thoughts do you have on that?
I don't know. I didn't go through that list. I know what list you're talking about. I forgot that actually that Levitz did that. I just took it as, like, I guess I was going off of Chameleon Boy saying it's almost as though she didn't know about her own world or time.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, is that a Supergirl reference? And there is I could make a guess what this all means, but if I do, it'll give away who she is.
Okay.
So, we'll keep that list handy for when we actually get the reveal, so we can go through all this again.
That'll be fun.
Yeah.
I did mention Cam, just something about Cam here. Those final two panels on that page where his antenna are twitching. I love that little detail because we've seen that before in his past where, he senses a mystery and his antennas start going crazy. So I like that. Of course, I think even I recently read an old story of the Legion where it was his ears that wiggled, I think. So, they don't get the details right, but the point is the same. His body reacts to a mystery. I just love that.
Well, it makes sense. I like the antenna choice better.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So then she flies through Labyrinth, and we get a little, I like the dialogue where she's saying, these sleeper suspense cells are better fates than many of these animals deserve. It's kind of like harsh words, but it certainly makes sense given her identity. Mm-hmm. And that's not Supergirl speak, like that's
right.
And the creators at this point have moved away from her being Supergirl. I think we talked about that in one of the previous issues.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that. I like that the suspicions of the other Legionnaires are closing it. If maybe that's what it is. It feels like things are closing in around her. Too many people looking at her, and I like that. I like it because we are close to wrapping this all up.
Well, and you get the reaction, Violet's reaction here. Oh, look who came down to the depths, Little Miss Mystery herself. She's she's not. It's not a phrase of endearment. So I guess I can understand the whole what you just described. Her the walls are closing in around her, but I guess I'm just not really. We haven't really been shown that other than Brainiac 5, I mean, people are curious and people are saying things, but no one's confronted her about it, except for Brainiac 5. So why does she feel this way exactly? Because I'm looking for evidence on the page.
Yeah. Well, I do like the one of the earlier scenes before this. Yeah, when they were stopping the when she was confronted by Emerald Empress, like in the previous issue. But you're right, nobody's really sort of confronting unless she can sense things. She's a sensor girl.
That's true, I guess.
Right. And certainly, I do like on that sequence where she's sensing that Microlad is on the ship, and you get all the different thoughts from the Legionnaires because they're just reacting. They're the same thing that the readers are saying. Why can't she tell us? She's got to be faking it. Telepathy. That's it. Is she Supergirl? Could she be? And then Colossal Boy's just like, who snuck on board? Like it's opening up more and more.
That's true.
And yeah,
but see, if I guess it's like the appearance of the abrupt appearance of Universo. If we'd only gotten a little bit of this before that first scene that we just talked about, that would make a little more sense. Right. And since we're on this, that sequence of panels that you just read, I kind of got a sitcom vibe from that, mostly because or not sitcom, soap opera type thing, right? It's just like they're pondering, they have these ponderous thoughts about her identity, and then Colossal Boy's like, "Who stuck on board?" But I thought to touch on the art again, this is one of the sequences where I really liked what LaRocque and DeCarlo are doing with the Legionnaires. They're doing a better job, or maybe I think I've said this before. Maybe it's DeCarlo here that I'm reacting to more, inking over LaRocque. But I really like the way that they're depicting the characters' faces here.
My one comedy moment in this issue that actually made me laugh out loud a little bit, and maybe it's just because of my own connection to what was said, but when Ultra Boy goes up against the Restorer a couple pages later, and Restore's like, Legionnaires, and Ultra Boy's like, let's be more personal. My name is Ultra Boy, and yours is about to be trivia. Like, I thought that was funny, actually, because, in the grand scheme of things of Legion villains, we're never going to see this character again, right? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So, and it's not like Ultra Boy, and yours is about to be mud. It's not that. It's like yours is about to be trivia. I thought that was really funny. And it almost was like a meta commentary almost. That's great. You want to talk about Mon-El's subplot?
Yeah.
So we've been getting this, I think, in the last issue or two, where we find out that the serum is not working as well as it should, and now we're getting it. Originally, it was from Shadowlass's point of view. Now we're actually getting it from Mon-El's point of view.
And I have the same complaint about this that I do the other things, which is, why didn't we get a little bit of this before? And I think I specifically called that out last issue. It just seemed like this whole idea of his serum not working just kind of came out of the blue. And I was thinking, if we had seen something like this prior to that last issue scene, then that would make a whole lot more sense to me. But, it works. It's just, and I like the fact that we're getting this more from his point of view as opposed to his girlfriend's, but I don't know. What did you think about this?
I actually like the way this has been developing, and some of it is because I'm putting some of it in my own headcanon of Mon-El's behavior, and we talked about that before too, where sometimes he feels a little short, he feels a little too much like the elder statesman, smacking the nose of some of the rookies, and I was like, whoa, hey Mon-El, calm down there. I don't know. It's talk about soap opera, right? It feels very melodramatic. And I think that's right. I like that I don't know. I'm not a Mon-El expert, but there's something right about him being isolated and talking to himself, especially if you think of he was in the Phantom Zone. I made the joke earlier, right? He was in the Phantom Zone for 1,000 years. Like if anybody knows isolation, it's Mon-El. So even to the point where he's brushing off that the Legionnaires need him, and he's like, I'll join them. I'll join them later. I was like, whoa. So for him to neglect his duty like that felt very weighty.
Oh, sure.
And of course, I know what the next issue is about, but I kind of dug it. Even Shadowlass, even, the two times that we see her, she's always like, hold me, Mon-El. It's so cold. It's so, like, I get it. I get what he's doing. Like, I'm okay with it. I feel like, I dig it. I don't know. There's something about it that I actually really like. And to know that it's a story point that, I'm going to paraphrase here, but I think Lytle is the one that came up with this story, I think. And that's why we're going to get him as an artist next issue. But at least it's something. At least it's something for Mon-El, because outside of that one Tales storyline that's probably a year or so more, a year old by now, we don't get much from Mon-El.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay, because he certainly was involved in a lot of like the Silver Age stuff. But, I'm okay with this. I'm okay with this.
Well, I certainly I agree with you. I like how we're getting his reaction to this and his fear to his situation, right? Because the last thing he wants to do is go back into the Phantom Zone. And like as you referenced that Tales story, that played up on that fear, and so I totally enjoy that aspect of it. I really, my only complaint to this is, the way in which the information has been revealed, I guess, over these few issues, I guess.
Yeah.
Can we jump to that other scene on page 20 with where you mentioned how Shadowlass is like, hold me, I feel very cold suddenly?
Yeah, sure.
So here they're at the fusion power sphere at Metropolis, and Polar Boy is complaining about not getting a lot of action as a Legionnaire. He's been sidelined a lot. Which is also kind of meta in a way, because that's exactly what's been happening to him.
Right.
But what I love about that is those bottom 3 panels on that page, where here's the younger member of the Legionnaire of the Legion, Polar Boy, in the forefront complaining about this, and you've got Mon-El and Shadowlass behind him in the background, and the way that they've drawn them mostly in shadow, I thought was a great touch, and the way that Shadowlass, her face is kind of downcast and almost angry, but I think that's just more of the way the shadows lie in my interpretation of it, because this should be worry and fear, but just the way that the shadows are done there, highlighting his predicament and what that means to the two of them, and to the Legion at large. And then you get the second panel, which they pull back some, and everybody's in shadow there. But they're talking about how Mon-El's telling Polar Boy, you have a whole life ahead of you and plenty of time to do your part. And the Legion may need your help more in the months to come, foreshadowing what we already know it could happen to Mon-El. I really enjoyed those, especially those 2 panels. It's wonderful melodrama there.
Yeah, you hit on all my points for that issue, and I love that last panel. Shady looks beautiful in that last panel there. Yeah.
Well, and sorry, she says, I feel very cold suddenly. Well, who's standing next to her? That's not the intent, I know. I just thought it was a nice little button.
Well, see, and these are those 3 panels, and if we want to move on to our favorite sequence of the book, which I think we're in agreement with, that's the beauty. That's when I love the Legion book, when it gets to those places.
Mm-hmm.
It gets to the emotional center of a lot of the characters or their relation. And I guess what I'm finding is, especially in this Baxter run, is it's not always so much about the main driving plot or the or the or the sort of conflict. It's about how the book handles what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think that's very evident in this issue. The whole Universo stuff is just wonky and just stuffed and just okay, but it's how the Legion comes to it that is, or how they talk about it or talk to each other. That's the stuff I'm really finding. I guess that's probably why I like this Baxter run so much. That I'm finding now it's not so much like the actual events of the action, because there's a lot of issues where nothing is happening. But how deeper can we get into these characters? That's what's the beauty of, I think, this Baxter run.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then if we jump to page 16 and 17, Ayla and Vi, Lightning Lass and Shrinking Violet, probably the strongest part of this book, probably the strongest sequence of any Greg LaRocque issue for me to date. And I'm putting a lot of what I already know about it onto this, but I loved this sequence.
Yeah.
And I think they even reference, a lot of the letter column writers referenced it too. But what'd you make of it?
Well, much like many things in this issue, it's some aspect of it seems a bit out of the blue, right? We have had these two talk to each other before, but not to this depth, I guess. And so that maybe that's the part that I'm kind of bumping on. When Violet says this is like I said at the top of the show. This is after Violet compliments Lightning Lass on her leadership on this mission.
Which she complimented her before too, like during
that's right.
The villain, when they were transporting the villains. Like that's actually been, I think, one or two times Vi has kind of made reference to her.
Right. But then she says, I've changed my whole life, Ayla. What about you? And so, if you just stop right there in that little picture perfect moment, it's like, well, what is this about, right? So is this something that they've talked about before we haven't been privy to? Is this the beginning of something that Violet wants to get into with Ayla? And then we get the next panel, or the next few panels. So Violet says, "Never mind. Maybe that's not fair. Maybe we don't know each other that well." And Lightning Lass's reaction, I'd like to, no, I'd like to answer you. What's the question? It's not just what about you. There's some subtext here that we don't know yet. And this goes along with exactly everything you said previous about the characters and their interactions and their development with each other. And this is just like, this was like a lightning strike to me in this issue.
I think what's interesting about it is if I try not to think ahead, right? And I just sort of take it for what it is, take it for everything that we've been talking about in terms of both Shrinking Violet, but really the Baxter run has been really focused on Lightning Lass, right? Like we've been talking about it since the first 5-6 issues of how Levitz completely changes this character, how she wasn't part of the book for a long time, and before she had left the Legion, and then the Baxter run is where she comes back. She's demanded a place on the Legion team. She's leading some of the missions, like of all the female characters, these are the two that Levitz has made a point of showcasing and bringing bringing them to a new level. So it makes sense that they would find each other, right? Like I feel like, Shrinking Violet compliments her there. You may still be squeamish, but you do a great job as team leader. You did a great job as team leader on this mission. And Ayla recognizes Vi and says, we both seem to have grown a lot lately. First of all, I'm not always a fan of sort of the widespread use of the Bechdel test, but here's two female characters who are not talking about men. They're talking about themselves. They're talking about their place on the team. And she says, I think we're better people for it. Don't you? Stronger, more assertive, more sure of ourselves. And Vi says, I've rethought a lot since I was trapped in that sense tank, lightning lass. I've changed my whole life. What about you? Now, Violet is farther along in this journey than Ayla is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I could see that she might recognize that in her thing. And let's go back to that Universo story where I think it was Saturn Girl who was like, "Oh, I forgot my Legion ring," and I think there was even something with one other of the female characters where it was like, "Man, they're written like that's terrible the way women are written in those." But I get it, it's a whole different era, So it's not like these female characters to take charge like this, or to have, or to be given storylines, or to be given identity, quote unquote, issues that usually the male characters are given, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's my place in this universe? That's especially in comics in the 80s. It's Peter Parker Spider-Man. It's not Mary Jane. It's not Black Cat. So that's what I really like. Again, not trying to push what I know, what happens after. So and then you think about like the core concepts of these characters. Vi coming across, it's a little aggressive when she says that,
Mm-hmm.
I've changed my whole life. What about you? It's because she recognizes maybe she recognizes something in Ayla, and she's trying to bring her, probably in an unfair way, to realize that you're on this same journey. Like, get on with it, like, but then she's like, okay, no, maybe that's not fair. Maybe we don't know each other. There's still a lot of hurt in Vi. Like, I feel like while she's healing, she also really is lashing out. Whether she lashes out, that's why she beats up on Microlad a few pages later. That's why she's always wants to fight, right? Like, there's still some trauma in her. So, and then you have Ayla, who again is being very shy, because that's also Ayla's thing, right? Like, when she was Light Lash, she was secondary. But when she's Lightning Lash, she's like, I'm in it. So you get these two characters. I feel like the artwork helps with this. Levitz is showing that they're on two different ends of the same spectrum, and they're going to need each other to get to the middle. So that's kind of what I took from, especially from those three panels up there, that Vi is, we're seeing that as strong as Vi has become, there's still something, she needs to be tempered a little, because she's wild, she's aggressive. And with Lightning Lass, she has all this potential to be where Vi is, but she still is doubting herself a little bit. So the two of them together could be great. And if then I put on everything I know about what happens, that's exactly what happens. The two of them together are stronger than the two of them apart, because they're on this same journey, and maybe they're just coming at it from different angles. So the way the artwork is, the personalities of the two of them, if I look at it from what we already read, and then that I think of it one way, when I look at it with what we already know what's going to happen with them, certainly you can see that this is the start of all that. Now, there's some people who are probably going to go, no, that's not what Levitz really wanted here. But I'm like, wait a minute. I don't care what you say the intention was. There's a connection here. There's a very sort of like Marv Wolfman connection here, not to shortchange Paul Levitz, where Wolfman was like, look, you got Raven, who was dark, you got Starfire, who was light, and you have Wonder Girl in the middle, right? And those three characters complemented each other. Levitz would be foolish if he didn't recognize that these two characters will complement each other. I'm not even saying romantically. That's not something that happens till much later. And we don't even really get that. You know, you mentioned subtlety. Boy, they were really subtle about their relationship later.
Yeah.
But he recognizes that these two characters belong together. And we've gotten so many guy-girl relationships. You don't, maybe you have Shadowlass and Phantom Girl, but they always bring their boyfriends along, So it's nice to have a friendship that is female-female for once. If that's all we want to call it right now, is an understanding, something a little bit deeper than just being legionnaires, So God, such a beautiful sequence.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, so, okay, now I'm going to be picky. What you said about them being 2 points on the same spectrum, that is perfect. Where I'm going to be picky is, Ayla, not Ayla. Why do we call her Lightning Lass Ayla, but we refer to Violet as Vi when her real name is Selu? Anyway, so Vi says, "I've changed my whole life. What about you?" And I'm looking at this, going, okay, what has Violet changed? She's no longer with what's his name? Duplicate Boy, right? She has this really aggressive attitude now, lots of anger. She's probably still suffering from post-traumatic stress, given what happened to her. But she's still on the team. Lightning Lass came back to the team, dumped Timberwolf previous to that. She is more aggressive, taken on more of a leadership role on the team, but she's still on the team too. What's Vi really talking about here?
I think you have to remember too, and I'm sure you do, because you mentioned that Ayla left. Vi was away from the team for a while she was recouping, and we did get that one scene where, she comes back. Dr. Gimmel's like, "No, you shouldn't go," and she's like, "Nope, I'm going to do it." Like I think it was in a Tails issue.
That sounds right.
Yeah, can't remember if it was in the first issue of the Baxter run, but anyway, they. And the other aspect of shrinking Violet is that she's also being overly aggressive with her sexuality, right? Like we already know that there's might be something with Sunboy. She might have shacked up with him a little bit, in a way that surprised even him. So they're both on the team. I mean, the Legion is their life, right? Like, to be stupid about it, we're reading the Legion book, and they're not going to get their own series, right? Like, we have to read them in the series that they're that they were created for, or whatever. Like, I don't think leaving the team would have been, and I don't know if this is what you're asking. I don't think leaving the team for good is what Shrinking Violet is about.
No, no, not at all.
Yeah.
It's just that
I think it's just about commitment and how the other people, how she wants to be perceived by everyone else. She doesn't want to be perceived as the shrinking Violet. She wants to be perceived as, I am a member of the Legionnaires, and I am as capable, if not more so, than all of you. Like in some ways, like it's that was certainly Lightning Lass's thing, where she was like, no. When she was talking to Timberwolf during the Great Darkness Saga, and she was like, "Come away with me so I can find who I am," and he's like, "No," and then she comes back and she goes, "Oh, okay, I had some doubts about the Legion, but I get it now." And then Shrinking Violet had some doubts about herself, but now she gets it. Now she gets who she is. So I don't know. I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, I think I may have emphasized the team aspect more than I intended, because it's the I changed my whole life. Well,
right.
They've kind of changed their lives in very similar ways. So what is it? What is it exactly that she's wanting Ayla to do beyond that which she's already done? So that's the part where I'm intrigued and want to know more about this conversation that they're having.
Right. And if we want to just put headcanon stuff or past future issues and maybe they are talking about sexuality.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the obvious thing for us, knowing what we know, but given what we're seeing right now, it's like, well, what's going on here? What's the impetus for this? What's going to be the results of that?
Yeah, I wish I knew. Obviously I don't, and we're two guys talking about this, but I wish I knew what else was going on in the '80s in terms of women's sexuality in like movies and TV show. Like, was there a soap opera, to go back to soap operas? Was there a soap opera that had a lesbian storyline? Was there a movie that had some kind of lesbian relationship? Because none of that stuff was out in the open. We certainly know what was going on during Reagan and the AIDS scare and all of that. But what was going on? What they were trying to find a voice. They were trying to find power. I don't know what the high points of fiction and art and literature are that deal with these issues that are kind of like the goalposts along the way. Like, the only thing I can kind of relate to is in the theater world. While there certainly were musicals that dealt with gay characters and gay relationships, one of the biggest ones that came out in the theater world was Angels in America, right? But that was written post-'80s. That was written, I think, it might have been late 89, 90, 91, somewhere around there, which really dealt about gay and lesbian, the gay and lesbian community in America at that time. Reagan, one of the characters is Roy Cohn in the play, just all that kind of stuff. So part of me is thinking, like, this dialogue here, I don't know if it would resonate to somebody else in the 80s when Shrinking Violet says, that's not fair. Maybe we don't know each other well. But then there is something that Ayla picks up on, because she goes, no, I'd like to answer you. It's almost like she might know what she's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But because it's the 80s writing.
Yeah.
And is there there's no comics code plastered on the front, but I don't think the Baxter run did get. Well, there's a comics code seal on the reprint, though. I don't know what they were dealing with then, like maybe they were like, no, you can't talk about that. I don't know what kind of conversations Paul Levitz had with Karen Berger about this, like if it was their intention, so. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of thing that I kind of wish I knew a little bit more about, but obviously I don't, because I'm very blind to that kind of stuff, especially if I try to think of what was going on in the 80s, in terms of that. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out for the rest of from here on, mm-hmm. and it may not.
Well, here I'll add this maybe this last thing here. Okay. This is from the Legion Companion book, and this is from the interview with Paul Levitz, and the question that was asked was, there's one thing which people have speculated on for a long time, and that's the relationship between Lightning Lass and Shrinking Violet. Would you care to clarify that?
Oh, right. I don't know what you're going to say, but I'm fairly certain he's going to say he had no intention.
You could interpret his answer that way. Yeah. Paul Levitz very succinctly says, I speculated on it too. Sometimes the characters write themselves.
Yeah, and it's like I said, I think, like I said when I brought up Marv Wolfman, I think he just recognized that these two characters had something in common.
Mm-hmm.
And it was no more, no less. And then maybe it's up to other writers later to pick up on it. But
yeah.
It's beautiful for that.
Yes.
That's take away all the romantic stuff or the sexuality stuff. It's a great sequence.
Yes, I was just going to say that too. It's just two women talking to each other, their friendship, and whatever else is Vi's really getting at here, whatever that turns out to be. It's just a lovely scene between two characters. It's probably the most character-centric material that we've had in a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I love it. I love those 5-6 panels.
I don't think we've gotten any scene like that between two guys.
Mm.
Or if it is, it's always Legion centric. It's always, like Element Lad and Brainy talking about Sensor Girl in the middle of the earth. But I don't think we've gotten anything like, nobody went up to Bryn when he was going through his mopey stage and said, "Oh, buck up, Timberwolf." There was none of that went on. So it's good. It's good. Yeah. I forgot that sequence was in this issue, so I was really happy. All right, let's wrap up some of our thoughts here on this issue. I'm just going to go through quickly, and then feel free to jump in. I had one more thing about the title "Dead End," which could be in relation to the cover too. A dead end could certainly mean a dead end to Brainy's investigation of Sensor Girl. Donnie as a tracker, right, could lead as a dead end to whatever she's searching for. The villains could be a dead end, could be what they're trying to do, kill somebody, blah, blah, blah. None of that really is super relevant, but I threw that out there. There's a Clark Kent cameo on pages 6 and 7 or whatever that is. Yeah.
I wondered if you were going to mention that, or... Yeah, I thought that was funny.
Yeah, that's kind of fun. There's another alien like Dr. Gimmel. And they all seem to be cranky, right? He was like a professor at the Metropolis University.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Like 3 arms there. I was like, oh, look. Okay. That's kind of cool. I got... This is great. Page 12. So they're at the Medicom. We haven't even talked about Ron Vidar, but he just gets wiped out and gets... That's something else Universo wanted. He wanted to take Ron off the playing field. Because, as we mentioned in the first appearance, if Rond is around, he's going to mess up Universo's plans. It's kind of a long, convoluted way to get him to do that, but whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it wasn't even a direct part of the plan. It was happenstance.
Oh, what? But he was at Metropolis University. I mean, maybe Universo knew that.
Sure, but if you're going to take him out, then why not directly take him out instead of this? He shows up to move or shove that professor out of the way, and he ends up getting buried in the rubble. It's just... that way it's just an innocent. Okay.
It's just what do they call that when you get hurt accidentally or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
An innocent bystander. But what I love about that sequence when they're in the meta complex, tell us, is this customary Brainiac 5? This complexity?
Yeah.
We have no healing centers on our world, and Brainiac 5. Each planet has their own way, tell us. And you see the one nurse. Your voucher, sir? Whoa, Levitt's like digging into the whole...
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about health, the health crisis now. They were talking about in the 80s. I love that. I love that.
Nothing has changed.
And then the ending, I think we might have said it, where Zendek is a little too casual with how he treats the Legion for the president's taste, and then Vid Gupta is like, I'm working on the Legion problem. So that was a nice little bit of dialogue. I don't know if that was brought up yet. So.
Yeah, and that whole bit, I just like I said, I think I mentioned that before, but the way that Universo is going about whatever his ultimate goal is, which I assume is to take over the United Planets. I don't know, but what a menacing plan, the way that he's going about this. I mean, to work the president of the United Planets and the politics of this and what that means for the Legion. It's, it'd be like finding out that our current vice president is an alien intent on taking over the world.
He's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you that body snatcher vibe.
Yeah, I can see that, Peter. But it's that. I mean, this is such a great antagonist for the Legion. It's not some supervillain they have to go like the Restorer. It's not some guy they have to go blast and arrest. This is something much greater, potentially much more depth to it than just defeating the villain de jour. So I'm digging where this might be going.
Yeah, they have, like I said, they have a huge rogues gallery. They should be bombarded every issue by three different villains, if you really think about it. But you can't write a comic like that.
Uh, since you just mentioned the commentary on the healthcare, there's you mentioned the scene before with Sensor Girl flying past all those prisoners in stasis, and I think we've talked about this before about the not the dystopian. What's the opposite of that? Utopian future that the Legion is supposedly inhabiting. Then you see things like this where these prisoners are packed like sardines. They're in stasis, right? So they're not experiencing it theoretically, but they're in stasis. No prisoners' rights in this world.
No. Prisoner rights. Ha.
And I think that's all I have.
So a couple comments from the letter column about this issue. This is from issue 28. Some of this has to do with the issue. Some of it just has to do with Legion stuff in general. We'll learn in that letter column 6 issues from now that the Legion they're getting a Mayfair source book, a role-playing source book, which is kind of cool. There's a volume 1, which is about the heroes. There's a volume 2, which is about the world, their worlds. I'm trying to find as much as I can online so that if we care to look at that at any point, that could be kind of fun. They mention that the story that this issue is setting up, they're calling it the Forgotten Heroes story. They say in issue 28, they say it's going to start with issue 31, but it doesn't start until issue 32, so 10 issues from now. And obviously the name will be changed. But there's a letter about this whole Shrinking Violet and Lightning Lass thing, which I thought might be fun to kind of look at. James Rickliff writes and says, many of the Legionnaires could stand to have more complex characterizations, but probably none more than these two, speaking about Shrinking Violet and Lightning Lass. First of all, what of Vi's assertion that she's changed her whole life? True, she's dumped a long-time boyfriend, but boyfriends come and go. True, she's become very aggressive after being quite shy, but both aggression and shyness are symptoms of insecurity. So here she has just traded the outward trappings and kept the underlying problem. In fact, unless she's allowed herself to receive proper psychological help, her sense tank imprisonment probably worsened her insecurities. Perhaps a story how she is coping with that past trauma would help us understand her better. And what of Ayla? Years ago, she was Timberwolf's little girlfriend. She was strong when he or someone else she loved needed her to be, but she really didn't have a life of her own. She seemed to depend upon her relationship with others to validate her sense of self-worth. But now, like Vi, she has swung it a bit too far in the other direction. For instance, her coldness to Brainiac 5 seems to say, I don't have to care what other people about other people. Methinks she doth protest too much. She does have to care about what other people, and I think she knows that. She just needs to learn that she can still care about herself at the same time. Paul, what I'm saying is, although nice and sweet is not deep characterization, neither is nasty and tough. Both Ayla and Vi have needed to swing from one extreme to the other before they can begin to find the more mature middle ground, but let's see that revealed. Now, this is kind of like the same thing that happened when Lightning Lass broke up with Timberwolf, and all the letter column writers were like, "Man, she was tough. She was a great." And it's like, okay, you bunch of men, relax here, like. So, and then Levitz responds, "Okay, the development of Wildfire took about 2 years when we moved him from the angry young man to a more mature role. By the same token, the comments you're quoting by the two women in question are their own present perceptions of the changes in their lives, and we would certainly agree that both have a distance to go. On the other hand, we question whether they haven't come further than you're giving them credit for. Boyfriends come and go for some women, but Violet's only been seen with one in her whole Legion career. That makes the relationship both unusually important and any changes in it likely to tie deeply into changes in her self-image. And in general, we feel that Lightning Lass's personality is at a very different state than Violet's. In any case, we promise further development with both. So just it kind of reiterates both, what you said and both what I said about where they are. But I also feel like that, it's a bunch of boys reading this comic, and they're like, "Oh, why are they so mean?" I'm like, "Oh, okay, shut up." But I just thought it was nice to read.
I do agree with the letter writer though about wanting to see more in what has happened with Violet and her reaction to it and the way she's dealing with it. I would love to see that story.
Yeah. Let's put that issue to bed.
All right.
That's issue 22. Real quick, Tales 335, which also came out. These are books that all came out in February, along with Legion of Superheroes 22. So the reprint issue, not of this issue, but the one that was coming out at the same time, was the Election Day issue. So it was the issue where we first were introduced to Vid Gupta. So, to go back to that whole, is Paul Levitz keeping track of things? That's kind of cool, whether it was intentional or not.
Mm-hmm.
So that leads us to Legion appearances around the DC Universe. And we have a few different comics, but we start off, as always, with Who's Who, number 15. And we have entries on Matter Eater Lad. Is that it?
I think that's it.
Yeah. I was looking at my notes and I was like, oh, wait, there's only one. Yay. Matter Eater Lad, as drawn by Keith Giffen and Bob Smith.
Yeah, is Bob Smith a frequent Keith Giffen inker?
Bob Smith didn't he ink the baptism issue? Yeah, I think we talked about it. Like he might have been on Ambush Bug or some of those Ambush Bug appearances.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense then.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Bob Smith over Keith Giffen in this particular image, but
not a lot that I picked up on. If I look at like the logo's, it's terribly plain.
Yeah,
I do like the image. He's 5'10", but weighs 150 pounds. He's a beanpole. Like that's thin. Like I'm 5'8". And I'm over 150. So I was like, whoa there. So his metabolism is amazing.
Yes.
Which makes sense.
Did they ever, I don't recall, did they ever get into the, does he have to eat a whole lot of stuff because of his metabolism? Because they kind of played around with that with post-crisis Wally West Flash.
Right.
So I thought that that would be a nice parallel too with Matter Eater Lad. But because I didn't realize he was 5'10", 150 pounds until I saw this too. So that's an interesting point.
Yeah. That's a little arbitrary, I think.
Yeah, I think I agree.
Yeah. I do like they say here, he was primed to be a presidential candidate on his homeworld. And in the Legion of Substitute Heroes special, we certainly got him in politics, but I don't know I haven't read much Matter Eater Lad before that. So I don't know if that's something that was already there, or is this Levitz giving them information of what he might do. Do you have any thoughts on that or no?
I seem to recall because I thought he left the Legion for a while, and then they because he was drafted into politics, and this was well before that Legion special, and then they came back for to eat the Miracle Machine, and then he was insane because of it. So
they were priming him.
Yeah, I think it was just more of this little plot point to easily write him out of the book at that time.
Yeah, and certainly in the 5 years later, we get a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. To much greater effect.
Yeah, brilliant.
I was looking, given that his home planet is Bismol, I was looking for other puns, perhaps, within his relatives' names. But I didn't really see anything that jumped out at me.
No. And on the cover, he's eating Metamorpho, which I was like, ew.
Is that what?
That's
Okay,
gross.
I was trying to figure out what that was he was eating.
Yeah, because Metamorpho goes from like a solid to water to gas.
Oh, you're. Oh, okay, I see. Because Mira's jumping out of the water, so I didn't quite
Uh-huh.
put that together. You're right.
It's like the states of matter, right?
Yeah.
Solid, liquid, gas. Yeah, and he's eating him. That's why Mercury from Metal Men is pointing. Is like, hey, stupid, you're eating this dude.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. And then Metamorpho is looking over him like, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Paris was brilliant at these
Yeah,
covers.
yeah. It's amazing what he could put together here.
Yeah. And then that's it. That's really it. That's
Yeah.
just the Matter Eater Lad. I didn't learn all that much.
No.
It's what it is. It's fine. Elsewhere around the DC universe, there's a couple books that I want to quick talk about. Booster Gold #4, DC Comics Presents #93. And we should make mention that, well, I'll save that for the end. So Booster Gold 4, DC Comics Presents 93. Did you look at any of these issues?
Yeah. Yeah, I looked through them.
Okay. Booster Gold 4, not a lot of Legion connections in that one. Still, even if he has a Legion ring, nobody's really talking about it. Sometimes they don't even draw it. Maybe the only connection really is that Rose and Thorn is in this issue. She even gets cover billing and an appearance. And if you think about current Legion comics on the stands right now in 2020, Rose and Thorn is supposed to be connected to the current Legion, but, that's not really evident either. So, not a lot going on in Booster Gold. I think we have a couple issues coming up that we will want to pay attention to because the Legion are featured prominently in them. So, for now, it's still not there. So that's why I wanted to make mention of that. Do you have anything on Booster Gold?
No.
No. Then we get to, again, as a way... See, really, I did this podcast so I could read my collection. DC Comics Presents #93. The whole series is about ready to end in another 4, 5, 6 issues. And we get one of the strangest combinations, Superman and the Elastic Four. I have always wanted this in my collection. I love DC Comics Presents as a series. And I was always like, oh my God, that's brilliant. Plastic Man, Elongated Man, a villain known as the Malleable Man, and Jimmy Olsen as Elastic Lad.
Yeah.
Which is the only Legion connection. Barely. That's the only reason why I sort of picked this issue out. Always wanted to read it. Loved the whole idea of who, and I used to always try to think, well, who's the fourth one? I guess it must be somebody new for the story, right? And that's what it turns out to be. Terrible issue.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's not good.
It's not good. Paul Kupperberg, Alex Saviuk, Kurt Schaffenberger. I mean, these are names, right? Augustin Maz, Jane D'Angelo, Julia Schwartz, editor. Not even all that fun. Like, I wanted it to be a lot funner, if I can just butcher language for a second. And I was like, what is this Silver Age meets the Bronze Age terribleness? This is terrible. For as much as I wanted to love this issue, when I read it, I was like, bleh. Basically what happens is there's a guy who's connected to Plastic Man and wants to recreate Plastic Man's, the way he got his powers, and goes to all the other stretchy beings and spikes their drinks, spikes the way that they get their powers as a way to mind control them, to bring them together to do stuff, villainous stuff. And along the way, they fight him with Superman. And there's all these strange things that just happen, like reasons why they run away, reasons why Superman isn't there. There's no Legion connection other than that this features Elastic Lad, as I said. And even the artwork, the first time he goes to spike Jimmy Olsen's formula, the artwork's wrong. They take Jimmy Olsen's formula and they put it into a beaker, whereas with Elongated Man, he takes the beaker and puts it into whatever's in it, into Elongated Man's drink. So even the art, that's why it was so confusing to me. I was like, well, I thought he was trying to steal their powers, but what he's doing is try to spike their formulas. So even the artwork's wrong, which makes it even worse. So yeah, not a good issue.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have nothing else to say about that issue.
Okay, great. That's fine. I'm sorry you had to read it.
No, it was. I've always liked the idea of the DC stretchy characters, except for Plastic Man. I don't really like that character, but I'm a Elongated Man over Plastic Man supporter any day.
Okay.
So yeah, it was a nice idea, I guess, to get all these characters in one book. I'm sure somebody at DC was like, "Ooh, this would be great," and then yeah, the execution is not good.
There's one line that I do like about what Plastic Man says. He says, "I'm sort of the granddaddy of malleable heroes, and it bugs me that someone would misuse these powers." That's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a great reference, and I did really get a sense of between Elongated Man and Sue Dibney. It's kind of well known that I don't know if they were intentionally created like this, but everybody always calls them like the Nick and Nora of the DC universe.
Yeah.
I wrote in my notes Burns and Allen or Hepburn and Tracy, but I guess the Nick and Nora thing really makes sense because they were detectives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've never experienced a Nick and Nora story, so you kind of got that here between the two of them, which was kind of nice. And even if you think of this being before the Justice League Wahaha era, even Sue and Lois Lane had a little moment together, although it was weird. Oh, let's get out of here. I don't know, just terribleness all over the place. I don't even like the way Elongated Man is written. Like, he doesn't feel. If I think about the Justice League stories of this time, because he was part of Justice League Detroit at this time. Like, even that, it doesn't. That's why I said it's like a Silver Age story in the Bronze Age, using Bronze Age conceits, but told through a Silver Age lens. So that's it. I just wanted to make mention of it because it was there. And that is it for me.
All right, same for me.
Okay. So, Eric, why don't you tell them where we're going next episode?
Well, next episode, we are going to read and talk about some books that I have in my collection and have had for quite a while, but I have never read. And that is the miniseries Legionnaires 3, spotlighting the trinity of the Legion, Lightning Lad, Saturn Girl, and Cosmic Boy. And I'm sure hilarity ensues when they all get together.
They've been absent from the main book, specifically for this reason. It's a 4-issue miniseries that I might have read the first 2 issues, but I never finished. For the longest time, I think I only had like 2 or 3 issues, and then collected it, at some point, but never read it. So I'm really looking forward to reading it. They go up against the Time Trapper, for anybody who doesn't know. And I'm really curious to see what it's like, especially since we're living in the crisis mode right now. We're not technically, well, we're definitely not pre-crisis at this time, but we're not really post-crisis just yet either. So I'm curious to see, when you deal with the Time Trapper, what does that mean? And we're going to wrap it up into one of our Tales of the Legion Project formats. So it'll be a non-numbered issue. It'll be the first time we're doing a Tales episode on multiple issues. So that's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
We've done it on a special. We've done it on an annual. A first issue of the current series and a movie, a Legion movie. So now we get to do a miniseries, which is one of the reasons why the Tales concept was even created, so that we could talk about multiple issues in one episode. So we're going to take a break from the Legion series. We'll go to Tales. That'll be our 5th one. And then we'll come back to the Legion Project issue 23 after that. So if you've read Legionnaires 3 or you want to talk to us about this issue or anything we've said in this episode, you can reach me, Peter at thedailyrios.com.
And me at longboxreview@gmail.com.
Please stay healthy, stay safe. Eric, you do the same. Stop working so much.
Yeah, wash your hands.
Wash your hands. I'm washing them right now. And as always, long live the Legion Project Podcast.
Podcast.
Ciao.
Bye, Peter.